All right, so we're gonna watch this video from CarQ. I think it's a good discussion. So I guess I should start with this with an... All right, so CarQ came out with a video talking about like roll queue and made a tweet. CarQ is so smart that he's promoting his Twitter within a video that's a hot discussion in Rivals. Isn't this great? That's why CarQ's is good at what he does. Speaking of that, follow my Twitter too. If you haven't, you know.
Thought that Marvel Rivals should have some form of roll lock at like 5:30 in the morning, and I woke up to 1.8 million views with some heated replies. Evidently, it's a divisive topic, so I'm going to clarify my stance and opinion after reading a ton of valid responses and criticisms, and then lay out the pros and the cons for both to hopefully open up a bigger, healthier...
This is pissing me off already. You're supposed to just take one side and double down the whole time. What is going on? I can't... Dude, you serious? Taking both sides of the story and coming up with a good discussion? Like, what... Obviously, that's how we usually approach stuff too, so it's just it's good to see. It's good to see. I'm glad he's taking that approach.
Discussion in the comments whether you agree with me or not. To start, the TLDR is that yes, I think this game should have some form of roll lock.
Okay.
Eventually. But it doesn't need to be now. It doesn't need to be in Season 1 or Season 2 or even in a year. I think the frustrations and pain points of 6 fully locked in DPS or duelists and no tanks or no supports will start bleeding out soon. We're in the discovery and honeymoon phase. So many Marvel Rival heroes to try out, so many combos, things are wacky, wild, chaotic, unbalanced, but fun. We don't need roll queue yet. Obviously, my name is CarQ. I come from Overwatch, so let's take a look back 8 years ago to 2016 release. At this time, no one...
I'll pause right away, and I'll say one thing. Him saying the words of, like, not now is correct. I'm not going to be able to get into a full discussion of whether the game will ever need it, but he's not incorrect that, like, you wouldn't do it now. I've already seen people going, like, oh, you got to put roll queue in the game now, and in Rivals, put it in now. No, it should not be now, at all. At least in my opinion, it shouldn't be there right now. Because, like, you need to let players just have fun with it.
One cared for roll queue or suggested it because we didn't need it at the time. People were figuring compositions out. People were having fun.
The problem is that, in my opinion, one thing Rivals has going for it is it allows you to play pretty much anything and also play it at a fast pace, all right? And being able to play at, like, a fast pace is a really fun part about Rivals. When they go into roll queue, it will inevitably slow the game down. That, or it will be like, and that's the problem. I think what makes Rivals so cool right now is, obviously, CarQ is also talking about the discoverability phase where you don't know anything, but it's a very fast-paced game in, like, a good way, right? There's a lot of damage, there's a lot of healing, you're always doing something, but it plays very fast. So, a lot of people are like, oh, they need to do roll queue right now. Go roll queue. But the problem is, the moment you slow down the game, that's where the frustrations will start to build up more. Because when you slow it down, and you go into roll queue, the game becomes solved quicker, right? When I say solved, it doesn't mean that, like, you're going to know what to do. It's going to take players years to figure out characters. Like, one of the things in Overwatch right now is that we've been playing the game for 8.5 years, right? A player playing D.Va now in comparison to 7 years ago is night and day. Even if it was the same kit, it's not, but if it was the same way, it would take a long time to adjust those playstyles. I mean, you even see it in Overwatch 2 with tanks where you kind of had to relearn the role. So, one of the problem is, though, is that if they went into, like, a roll queue right away, it would slow the game down, and then that's when you get to the quicker... You don't walk fast, though. They could adjust the speed levels for sure, but I think they do that also on purpose with the way their maps are designed. So I can't comment on, like, the fast part. But imagine this. Imagine already in Rivals you feel like you don't walk fast enough. Now imagine taking that into a roll queue and slowing the game down even more, right? That wouldn't be good, in my opinion. Now, once again, it could be good discussion on that, but I don't think that's where you want to go with it, right? I think keeping the fast pace, like, allow players to play whatever type of situation, I think there becomes something that gets lost here, right? Is how far do you take a game from a competitive point of view to strip away some of the fun? And I think that's what it comes down to. I think right now, as of now, the way it's played is very fun, right? The way it's played right now, as of right now, is very fun. Now, in 2 years, that could change. So CarQ's point of, like, eventually, maybe. But even then, I don't know. Because we don't know how many heroes they're going to add, right? If they add 3 heroes a season... Why would you even do that at that point? That shifts up meta to begin with. Like, there's a lot there, but you said there's always a meta. Roll queue has nothing to do with that. Sure, so I can go back to my experience of playing Overwatch for 8.5 years. Even when there's meta, though, so let me give you an example. I actually, when I played Overwatch, and I played it a lot more competitively, there was like 5 different metas at once, because you could do anything. It was, you could run a Ryan Zarya comp. You could run a Ryan Roadhog comp. You could run a Winston 3 DPS comp. You could run a Winston D.Va double flyer or a flyer comp with Pharah. There was so much variety to strategy before they had that roll queue into the game that it actually created a lot of depth of strategy. It actually was a legitimate thing where, like, you had options, right? I just want to point that out. Like, yes, there's always going to be what you would say is a meta, but there's more variety to a meta when you don't lock it down to like a certain like thing. Does that make sense? Oh, I did, and like I said, and just because that was my experience, it doesn't mean that on the flip side, people weren't experiencing it differently in that sense. So I'm not going to take that part away from you. I'm just kind of giving you how I felt, where like there was a lot of different comps that were being played for a long time, and it allowed for variety, and it also allowed for things to swap up a lot too. Like a lot of the times you could get out of the meta. It wasn't until we hit GOATs where actually, technically you could argue Moth meta is where it really started, but even Moth meta, you were allowed to play that. It was just that competitive being good. But right when GOATs started, probably around GOATs. I think when it got to GOATs, that's when things shifted a lot and they had to make those changes. You said if fun is somebody's priority, they need to run quick play or arcade. I think you can have it be fun with competitive. I mean, you know what? Let me ask you this question. Any football fans, NFL fans in the chat? Do you prefer the NFL when they call 7 to 8 illegal formations a game or when they call 0? Because that's what it feels like to me with roll queue and non-roll queue. I'm just saying, if you've been watching the NFL this year, they've been really adamant about adding in like the illegal formations, and they just go in there, right? I was definitely a player in Overwatch 1 who wanted to see roll queue. I keep that in mind because I got to see how the games got as there. Whether or not that would end up being the right choice, I mean, we'll never really know. I think like you want my take if Overwatch at one point decided to cut off all of their patches like they did. Because what happened was Overwatch 1 decided to not do any more patches to prepare for Overwatch 2 for like 2.5 years. I think that's what it would have done, regardless if it was roll queue or open queue. I think that's really what hurt the game. But
messing around with abilities, 3 Torb turrets, learning the game, just like Marvel Rivals right now.
Yep.
Like if we think back how insane and imbalanced some heroes were in hindsight, again, mass res, fast alt charge, Widowmaker dealing 150 damage body shots, how bad D.Va's kit was, however many iterations.
First of all, D.Va's kit at the launch was by far one of the worst heroes I've ever seen in the game. I just gotta point that out. And I have no idea. After revisiting Overwatch Classic and playing D.Va on launch, I don't even know how people play D.Va on launch. Oh man. Props to any person who played D.Va at launch Overwatch. I cannot believe that's what D.Va was like for a while. This is coming from somebody who plays a ton of D.Va. Holy crap.
The Metra had to go through. And that's the thing. It didn't matter because people were figuring it out and just having fun.
And that's where Rivals is at right now.
Anything to compare it to.
Yep.
Like right now, I'm asking myself every day, is Penny Parker actually good? I also haven't seen a single good Wolverine player yet. Does that mean he's bad?
I don't know if you saw Flats and I play Wolverine, but I was in that lobby.
Or are people just not figured him out yet? In any case, my early experience was all in quick match. Nobody cared, right? All good, all fun. But then competitive came out and I played it. And at first, it didn't matter what team comp we were running. We were smoking people with 1 tank comp. Sometimes we were rolling with 4 DPS, 2 support. I was playing with Flats and other Overwatch people who have a lot of thousands of hours of hero shooters, right? But then we started playing against better and better players as we climbed. And we were starting to run into like some former Overwatch pros, Apex pros, and other players who weren't picking their nose and picking up a shooting game for the first time, right? And it was starting to get really sweaty. And I got a nice early reminder why I love Rollock, because they ran 2 tanks while we only had 1 tank. Flats is our only tank player playing Hulk, and he was not having a good time. And then if you have the other team with good players on 2 tanks with high HP pools, actually spacing us out with like a good Doctor Strange and Groot, it was rough. So here are the pros for...
Can I be honest with you, by the way? I had a different experience in ranked. So I got the top 500 in Rivals already. Obviously, I'm gonna have to regain it when I play it again, maybe today or tomorrow. But I had a different experience. I found that against a lot of like the really good players in Rivals, a lot of it was 1-3-2. So they would run those comps, but the 1-3-2 comp, if you ran it correctly, was really good. Like you would have 1 tank, 3 DPS, 2 supports, and it was. But this goes back to what I was saying. Do you see how there's a lot of variety? So like while that comp was working against CarQ and like Flats playing like the whatever comp they were playing, I also got to see it from the other side where it was like 1-3-2 was great. We had 1 tank and they create space. You keep them alive. You can also like with heroes like Luna Snow, you can like, because you're seeing Luna Snow a lot, you're seeing Mantis a lot. Like you can keep up your tank without even have to worry about him. You can keep up one of your DPS by pumping heals into your tank because you can just put on the Xenorb thing that Luna Snow has. So like, I feel like that's where it almost feels like this is more along the lines of no one's playing optimally yet. So
roll queue. I'll go into the cons after. Number 1, reduce player conflict. People will complain about being that one guy who...
Okay, I gotta pause for a second. I think CarQ could just stop that as people will complain. Right? I don't even think CarQ needed a follow-up sentence to that.
Who wants to play Duelist as well, but the other 5 people already locked it in. Is there the social pressure to flex to a tank or a support for the sake of the team?
No, just go duelist. Listen, they want to go. Listen, if they want to go 5 duelists, I'm joining you. We're gonna win on this, or we're gonna lose on this.
Some may do it, but the majority will say fuck it. Just play what I just play what I want. I don't care. The entire team will take the L now because it's a game of chicken. Who wants to be the better guy? Probably no one. So I'm gonna lock in DPS as well because nobody else is flexing tank. Fuck you guys. The second pro is that I think role queue will improve matchmaking quality.
This is true. This is also, so the reason why I know this is true is because I've actually had this discussion in chat with with Gavin, Gavin's awesome at Blizzard. And it's like, in Overwatch right now, they've been testing this mode called Max 3, Max 2, depending if they're 5v5 or 6v6. And the idea is that what you'll do is you'll queue, and then you pick your roles when you get into the game, and it locks it based off of that. And then also, if you have Kingmaker, benefits the hero. We kind of like mentioned the positives and negatives in the chat at the time, and one of the negatives was that if Overwatch ever went down that route, and this can apply to both games, you will have worse matchmaking quality because you can't predict. It's hard to like matchmake that. Like you can have a general idea of skill level, but it doesn't mean it will align. Your games might feel like 5% worse, but you get quicker queues and you get more like strategy. Does that make sense? So that is one thing that is correct of that, is you do have a better matchmaking quality. It's easier to match that. The question is how much of a difference is that quality? If it's like a 5% difference, I don't think it matters as much. I think it's, heck it, just send it, right?
Sometimes you just lose in the hero select screen because of the egos with the conflict I mentioned earlier. But then if that one person does decide to flex and gets bullied into playing a tank for the team, their tank skills may be terrible and don't match the ranked elo bracket they're playing in. And then they feel bad because they did what they could for the sake of the team. They tried flexing the tank and they still got shit on, and they lost because their tank wasn't up to par as their main role, DPS for example. Now, role queue alleviates this problem, giving each role an individual skill rating. Like my DPS in Overwatch is like Diamond, but my support is my best role, it's GM. There's a difference in playstyle in different roles, which translates to a different skill rating. All right, the third pro is that I think role queue is easier for newer players in ranked, right? I think focusing on a single role is easier for newer players because they no longer have to juggle that pressure of knowing how to play the other roles just to fill team gaps. Usually advice I give for new players in Overwatch is to focus on one role because there's a lot to learn. So many maps, so many damn heroes. Like focus on one and learn that playstyle. All right, I've glazed role queue long enough. Here are the
I mean, he's, like I said, there definitely is the social aspect of the game with role queue, where like it's a battle between your teammates, but you can clearly tell I'm leaning more towards no role queue for the game because like I just feel like let people have fun. People are gonna get mad either way, and this allows at least you can play whatever you want at that point. Like it's just, once again, I'm not saying that there can't be a world where in the future they do it, but I think Karq said at the beginning of the video, it's not time yet for something like this.
Overwatch players obviously face that problem with DPS players getting like those 10-minute queues, 10+ minute queues.
Because you're waiting on tanks.
Because you absolutely have the majority of players wanting to play DPS, and the least amount of players probably queuing tank. Reason number 2 is there's less team comp flexibility. Right now, an open queue.
This is why Overwatch struggles with the Orisa like issue. We meme about it all the time with Orisa, but one of the reasons why Overwatch actually struggles with this is because they can't balance a way to find Orisa to like change in the ranks. So what the point I'm making is that like because it's like so role queue heavy, they can't. There's no winning. It's just like you get stuck on certain roles and that's it.
Players.
Or certain characters.
3 different roles spits out 729 possible team combinations. The point is there's a lot, right?
Yep.
So if we do have role queue, players can no longer be as creative, and a big argument against role queue seems to be mostly this one, actually. Like, I'm not blind. I can definitely see this being very, very fair criticism against role queue. Like, what if you wanted to play 1 tank, 3 DPS, 2 supports? Doesn't actually sound that bad. All right, con number 3 is that there's honestly a high restraint on tanks and supports. God knows how much people bitch about tanking in Overwatch, and a lot of it does stem from 5v5 being a solo.
Oh, do you mean the part where everybody tells you how to play tank, but they don't actually play tank? Everybody in the world knows how to play tank, but they've never played an hour of them? Isn't that your favorite one? The one where no one plays tank, but they all know how to play tank somehow, and they tell you what to do, and then you do it, they get mad at you for doing that? That's a classic, isn't it? It's great.
Solo tank, but also just the fact that, you know, separate the role of tank is generally pretty thankless and unfun for the most part, because soaking damage and being the punching bag for the team isn't popular in any game. Not even just a Marvel Rivals Overwatch problem. Tanking in any MMO.
Oh, World of Warcraft runs with it too.
Less
no one wants to do it.
Clicking a DPS and pew-pewing the other team. The pros for no role queue is, of course, wild experimentation, chaos, and the thrill of winning with the suboptimal comp. It creates very high highs, and people who used to play Overwatch who are against role queue, the angry people in my Twitter replies,
I'm gonna go be angry in his tweet. No, I'm just kidding.
remember that those moments, those highs, which I can agree on, are amazing where you win with the occasional 1 tank, 5 DPS, no support game. I feel like they often forget how actually awful and terrible it was when it didn't work out. The human brain is funny where it naturally suppresses bad memories or bad feelings to protect you. Now, at the end of the day, it's up to NetEase what direction they go, obviously. So if the paths split, you know, if I can see the future, the timeline, here's what I think they should do if they go down the path of role queue versus keeping it the way it is.
I'm listening.
If they go down the path of role queue, the compromise here is that I read people's responses on this tweet, and I don't think they actually need it in quick play casuals. That's a stance and compromise I think most reasonable people were agreeing on in the post. Keeping it competitive, I'm okay with this. The default quick match should stay open queue.
I'm kind of cool with that. I mean, if they had to do it, I think, like, yeah, don't touch the casual side of it. Yes.
Number 2, actually, when I say role queue, I don't necessarily mean 2-2-2, which is what most people understandably assume since I didn't clarify it. I think the game should be a minimum 1.
So this is basically talking about what Overwatch is trying to do now with the max 3 or whatever.
Right? So if they go down the path of role queue, minimum 1 on each role. That's it. It's a minor restriction, but much looser in theory. Okay, hear me out. That means if we have minimum 1 tank, 1 damage, 1 support, and then 3 flex spots. That means you can create 10 different compositions with this restriction. You can have 1 tank, 4 damage, 1 support, or 2 tanks, 3 damage, 1 support, 1 tank, 1 damage, 4 supports, etc., etc. Right? Again, I mentioned earlier that the pure open queue iterations that you're playing right now gives you 729 possible composition. My minimum 1 proposition here gives you 10 reasonably solid compositions, and obviously the hard roll lock of 2-2 is only 1. So 729, 10 comps versus 1 comp. It's a big jump from 729 to 10 comps, but you know,
That violin hits hard. To talk about it, like, this is actually what Overwatch has been experimenting with, right? This is, I would not doubt it if something like this is what Overwatch does, just to make that clear too, because they're experimenting with it. I think they're getting less sold on roll lock nowadays. I think that's why they're experimenting with a lot of different stuff now. I wouldn't doubt it if we're in days soon where Overwatch doesn't do roll lock, which would be interesting. It might do like what CarQ's mentioned in here because of that.
you know, the minimum 1 removes some absolutely absurd comps that wouldn't work out in most cases for most ranked games, right? Going in as, you know, 0-6-0 or 1-5-0 or 3-3-0, probably fun for a bit of memery and tomfoolery, but realistically, it probably wouldn't work out in most games, barring the occasional cheese win. And that's why we can keep those cheesy 0-6-0 comps in the casual quick match mode. So going back to my tweet, for competitive balance reasons, I hope they consider this route, roll queue in this proposed way on what I think they should do.
Okay.
But for completely selfish reasons, part of me also hopes they deviate and don't take this path as well, and just see how long it holds up, right? See if this completely different path, not following the footsteps of Overwatch, can keep an active competitive player base. I think this game for casuals will always be fine. It's the Marvel IP. People love the hero fantasy and playing their favorite character from the comics, shows, and movies.
I agree.
But for competitive players, how it holds up will truly be the test of time 1 or 2 years down the line. In any pro tournament, I will eat a fucking sock if a team commits to a non-minimum 1 in any role. Like if they truly go 0 tanks, 6 DPS, and 0 supports for the entire game, not just for like a quick capture cheese strat, I'd be truly surprised if they can pull that off. Like in a match where both teams are of similar skill, not where one team is just memeing because they're so much better than the other team. It'll likely prove that you do need a minimum of 1 on each role, a very beefy tank to soak up some damage, and at least 1 support because of the insane upkeep potential. Like I think supports are so damn strong in this game because I'm farming 25-30k healing a game sometimes.
Supports are pretty fun.
To the other path. If they decide not to go down the path of roll queue and keep it the way it is, I have a couple of suggestions. Number 1, they need to incentivize tank and support roles more, and they can do that by incentivizing the tank plus support team ups a little more, right?
I will say, even though Scarlet Witch isn't a support, Magneto and Scarlet Witch makes Magneto like 10 times better.
I think this is a small solution to encourage players to play the other roles. Like, these team-ups are actually OP as hell. Like, getting brand new abilities, getting a Magneto sword, or getting just raw buffs, like raw damage buff, raw HP buff, getting a Tracer recall on Psylocke. It's actually insane. Just don't make specifically 2 damage team-ups more powerful than anything else.
I get what CarQ's saying. CarQ's saying that you can incentivize good comps by creating team-ups that are fun. Only downside of that is it could cause, like, a meta one, but most people won't care.
Number 2, they need to improve the ratio of tanks and supports, right? There's so many freaking DPS or duelists in the game and not as many, sorry, I call them tanks, vanguards or strategists. They need to improve that ratio. I'm sure it improves the percentages a little bit by having like 5.
Do you want a hot take? I think they made the correct decision doing as many DPS as they did to start, because that's where people are going to have the most fun, and then now they can expand out from the role after that. It's probably a hot take, but I know why they did it. Now they can kind of focus on those roles. And honestly, I mean, I wonder how much they're churning out heroes to begin with. I wonder if they're only going to do one hero every 3 months, or they're going to do like multiple heroes every release. So
new vanguards added to the game rather than DPSs to probably encourage a wider pool and a higher chance of somebody willing to flex onto that. But yeah, I think with this team-up system, they have to rotate it, and this is what they need to do if they don't go with role queue. So in conclusion, I hope that clears up any confusion on what I tweeted. Hopefully this is promoting some good discussion and discourse. I'm really rooting for this game to do well. I'm not going to be a Marvel Rivals hater or an Overwatch hater. I play both games, right? Believe it or not, you can do that. So now I bring it back to you guys after listening to me yap for a little bit. Do you think there's any other solutions you guys have here? More pros and cons I missed? Do you think some kind of role queue would benefit the game? Would it not? Do you think the devs should competitively balance or casually balance? I'm more reasonable than you think. Like, even though I think the game should have role queue in some capacity, like, I'm fine listening to other people. Like, relax a little, Timmy. People are saying, like, you're so stupid, you're stupid influencer, you're gonna ruin our game stating your opinion. Like, relax, man. I love listening to stuff like this and listening to people's opinions, as long as they're not just like sticking the middle finger up to me without hearing me out. And I'm gonna hear you out, so let me know.
Cool. All right. Well, you know what? Good video by Karq. Okay. Yeah, I mean, Karq, he brings up some good points. I think at this point, and I can just summarize it quickly since I've talked a lot during the video, let it be as is for now. Let the game grow a bit. Let people kind of understand heroes, and then this discussion can be brought up later. I just think this is way too early of a discussion right now. I think right now we're just in an opportunity for, like, let people learn the heroes, let people figure out what's strong, what isn't, and then you start to kind of like look at all that stuff. But that takes a while because players are not going to be playing these characters that well for a long time. And if they have a very like quick cadence on hero releases, that's going to slow down that process even more because it's a constant thing. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes. It's a good video. I just think it's too early to really even get into these discussions yet. It's gonna happen. Let people have some fun, and maybe there is good options. Maybe there's a good middle ground, right? I think that's what Karq was trying to say is more of a good middle ground, and I agree with that. I don't think you want to slam people with the 2-2-2. It's just not gonna be worth it. Anyway, we'll see. Obviously, make sure to check out Karq. Obviously, a good friend. Sub to his new Rivals channel. Sub to my Rivals channel that this is probably gonna be on. And yeah, hit the like button. Subscribe to all my YouTubes if you haven't. Leave a comment. All of it helps. If you want me to react to more videos, etc., or submit stuff, my Discord's where you do that. Also, we record these live on stream. You can see the Twitch chat below the webcam. Also stream on YouTube, so stop by if you haven't. With that being said, I hope you all have an amazing day/night.